Welcome to Street Signs. We're live in London and Brussels. I'm Joanna Bersecci, and these are your headlines.
Sterling dips and the FTSE 100 rises as UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has a setback in Parliament this weekend past. But the British Prime Minister eyes another attempt to push through his agreement as early as today.
And banks and home builders lead the gains as the EU receives a forced extension request from Boris Johnson. But the British government insists the country is leaving the bloc by the end of the month. Lebanon's prime minister agrees to a series of economic reforms in an attempt to calm unprecedented anti-government protests. Experts at the IMF annual meetings raise concerns over negative rates. In an exclusive interview with CNBC, UBS chairman Axel Weber warns central banks have lost their way.
In recent years, the ECB's loss of distance has been much less with policy. But it's lost its distance to market. The central bank should guide markets on where they're going rather than sort of be in a standoff with markets about the future. And we've seen that in the US, we've seen it here in Europe.
Well, good morning and welcome to Street Signs. It's Monday. We've got a lot to get through on the show today, but I just want to give you a quick recap of what's been happening with markets. The handover from Wall Street on Friday was pretty negative. We had all of the three majors end the day in negative territory. A big drop for Boeing, actually. That stock was down about 7% in trading on Friday, dragging down the Dow. But I should mention, yet again, the S&P is still about 1.5 percentage points away from its all-time high. Dow about 2.5 percentage points. So overnight in Asia, pretty mixed tone as well, even though we had some positive language coming out of the Chinese Vice Premier Liu He, saying that China and the U.S. have made substantial progress in many aspects and have laid an important foundation for a phase one agreement. So some positive signs with respect to the possibility of getting a trade deal passed, perhaps as soon as mid-November, as President Trump suggested on Friday. So pretty much a mixed handover from Asia, but you can see the mood in Europe is actually pretty positive. The stock 600 up 0.3 of a percentage point today, this after ending the week last week, pretty much around the flat line. So a positive tone on this Monday morning. Let's talk about the individual indices, though, and I'm sure there's one index in particular everyone is focused on. That is the FTSE 100 in the UK. And we're trading pretty much around the flat line, really, slightly positive, about 0.1 of a percentage point higher. We have seen some weakness in the sterling pound this after Saturday's super decision. And ultimately, that led to the delay of the meaningful votes. We'll talk more about that shortly with Steve. But this is a reaction in the FTSE so far. Within the index, though, we are seeing a big positive bounce for the home builders, for banks. RBS is up about 2.7% today. So it has been a positive day so far for the domestic exposed stocks. DAX in Germany up 0.7 of a percentage points again. Big rebound here. Was under pressure last week towards the end of the week. But overall, the German DAX continues to do quite well despite the negative backdrop when it comes to the data. CAC 40, the underperformer today. We're seeing a bit of a drag from luxury stocks. Again, some more protests in Hong Kong over the weekend, dragging down on the French index. FTSE MIB also up about 0.4 of a percentage point. But let's talk about the sectors and the individual breakdown. So right up at the top, we've got the banks. As I mentioned, a lot of the UK banks are actually leading the charge today. We've got RBS, as I mentioned, up 2.7%. Barclays up about 1.5 percentage points as well. So that's one of the reasons why the banks are doing so well. Remember, this is a big ECB week, not a big decision week, but definitely will be a key one for the banks to watch in Draghi's last meeting that happens on Thursday. Auto is also seeing a rebound up 1.4%. Basic resources up a similar amount. And then, as I mentioned, luxury household goods are down about 0.4 of a percentage point. Right at the bottom, we've got defensive real estate down 0.8 of a percentage point. But let me take you back to sterling because it has dipped this morning after British lawmakers voted to postpone a meaningful vote on Boris Johnson's new Brexit deal, forcing the UK Prime Minister to request a new delay to the October 31st deadline. Now, Johnson sent an unsigned letter to the EU requesting an extension, but also sent another letter arguing against a further delay. So the government is set to push for another vote on the deal as early as today. And Steve joins us live from Westminster. And perhaps, Steve, you can shed us a little bit more light on the developments from Saturday, because many of the analysts that I've read over the weekend are saying that actually, if you put two and two together and add up the let's win the votes. It does seem as though that this government does actually have the numbers to get the deal over the line. The question is whether or not a meaningful vote can actually happen today in an unamended format.
Firstly, I think those analysts and those commentators are taking an enormous leap of faith on the numbers as well, because I've just spoken to key lawmakers here this morning, including Hilary Benn and Justine Greening, and we'll hear from them in a few moments' time, and they don't know what the numbers are. So if Dominic Raab thinks he's got the numbers as well, then he is in a minority, because, quite frankly, it is moving so quickly. I mean, for instance, who would have thought a week ago that the DUP would be voting with the opposition potentially for a customs union in an amendment to the second reading of the Withdrawal Agreement and Implementation Bill? I mean, it's just extraordinary permutations going around. Plus the fact, as I say, I've been speaking to the likes of Justine Greening, and she won't be voting with the government as well. So getting those numbers could be absolutely torturous. And then, of course, there could be all kinds of amendments as well. But what happened on Saturday was your question. Well, there were three things that happened. One, there was a 1 million-person march looking for a people's vote stroke second referendum on the streets of London. Even if you think it was less than 1 million, it was still a mighty expression of will from a large portion of the population. The second thing that happened that was absolutely key was that the Letwin amendment to the meaningful vote actually meant that there was no meaningful vote. So actually the third thing that would have happened didn't happen, because basically people have lost trust with the Prime Minister to enact a deal regardless and not actually have to a fallout, a no deal as a default position as well. So what this was doing was making watertight the Benn Act as well. And of course the third thing that did happen was that this photocopied, unsigned letter went along to Donald Tusk, and Donald Tusk admitted he had received it. So I think that should negate the Scottish Court of Sessions today, which has legal proceedings just checking whether the Prime Minister obeyed with the letter of the law. And as such, this letter was accompanied, of course, by another letter from the Prime Minister that was signed, saying he thinks an extension would be bad for the EU and bad for the UK as well. Which brings us forward to today as well. And is there a way forward? Well, I've been speaking to Hilary Benn, he of the Benn Act as well. And for those of you who have a historical nature, the son of Tony Benn, one of the most foremost politicians of the bygone Labour era as well. And they are speaking to Hilary Benn about, is there a way forward? Is there a way forward for the government's WAIB, Withdrawal Agreement and Implementation Bill? Well, he says yes, if. Well, listen in.
The compromise in the middle, which was offered to Theresa May, but she didn't take it a year ago by my good friends Peter Kyle and Phil Wilson, is to say, look, we don't like your deal, but we are prepared to see it go through, provided it is put then to the British people, because then the voters can decide, is that the kind of Brexit that you wanted? Because although the referendum result said leave, it didn't clarify what kind of leave, what kind of future relationship we're going to have with our biggest, nearest and most important trading partners. And I think if Parliament can't make progress, then the numbers are gradually building. I hope we might get to a point where a majority would say, OK, none of these outcomes is terribly attractive, but at least this will give us a result, a decision which people want.
So there you can see a snippet of the opposition strategy for this week. If the meaningful vote happens today or not, I almost think it's by the by to a certain extent, because, of course, the Letwin Amendment means that you won't get a full thumbs up until after all the implementation of the legislation anyway. But tomorrow's second reading of the Withdrawal Agreement, now this is key, because if the opposition, the likes of Hilary Benn, Sir Keir Starmer, who put it forward as his idea over the weekend as well, can get amendments on customs union or get amendments on a second referendum, then it would get support. But if he doesn't get those, of course, then the government, and we go back to that original point that you made, Jumana, about government relying on its own numbers as well to get this forward as well. But they're going to need a lot of MPs to back them, independent MPs who they've stripped the whip from, of course, because there are 21 Tory rebels, including the former Education Secretary, MP for Putney, my old MP Justine Greening, who said, no, I'm not voting for it unless I get the confirmatory referendum. Let's listen in to what Justine Greening said to me this morning.
It may be that only the British people really can be the final arbiters of whether this Brexit and the bill that we're passing through Parliament really represents the Brexit that they wanted. And if it doesn't, of course, then they absolutely should have the chance to say, you know what, I think we're best off with our existing deal with the EU. So
regardless of whether Mr Burko lets there be another meaningful vote today, we do understand the government's going to try and bring forward the WAIB, the Agreement and Implementation Bill this week, and then try and get an accelerated process thereafter if votes go their way, possibly as early as tomorrow. Just want to confirm, you as a former Secretary of State, a Conservative Secretary of State, will be voting against the government. You are one of the 21 who will be voting against the government.
I will not vote for a deal unless it's put to the people in a referendum.
Justin Greening, the MP for Putney, talking to me earlier. Incidentally, for those historians again of you, that was David Mellor's old constituency before he lost it to Tony Coleman in the late 90s as well. Anyway, that's a history which you don't need to know about. What is going on this week is what you do need to know about. So regardless of an MV today, a meaningful vote, which it looks like, as you say, Mr. Burko may not let happen. The key day looks like it's going to be tomorrow now, and the government's got to win two things. One, it's got to get the second reading victory on that, get this whole process going. Secondly, they want to accelerate the time frame for this, so they need a timetable motion victory as well, which meant they could use late nights, weekend sittings. Goodness me, what the House of Lords going to think of that? Bless them. Back to you.
No easy task for them, indeed, and no easy task for the MPs who are working their socks off, like you, Steve. All right, let's see the alternative angle, though, because the European Union is considering Britain's request for an extension. Several reports suggest Brussels will hold off on a decision until after UK lawmakers vote on the New Deal. So Sylvia joined us live from Brussels. And Sylvia, European leaders will have received two letters, one signed, one unsigned, from Boris Johnson. What do they do from here?
It's indeed another request when it comes to this third Brexit delay. So the European Union received those letters from the Prime Minister, from Boris Johnson, and at the moment they're assessing what they should do with them, how they should react. For the time being, as you mentioned, they're waiting for more developments in the House of Commons to see how the lawmakers there want to take this Brexit forward. So then the EU27 know what's best to react, whether to say yes or no to this deal. Because when we talk about an extension, the EU needs to think of, should we say yes or no? But they also need to think of, for what reason should we say yes, and for how long should this extension be? Now, we heard from the Times reporting that the EU is likely to grant a 3-month extension if the deal does not get approved in the House of Commons this week, but it's very early at this stage to know whether that extension would last those 3 months, or if certain countries, including France, who's been very vocal against further extensions, could ask for something shorter and dub it as a technical extension to allow for this deal to get approved in the House of Commons. But let's not forget as well, when it comes to a technical extension, we've seen that before, and that did not help the process either. So let's see how the things happen, how things evolve in the House of Commons in the coming days, and then, of course, how the EU will react in the coming days. Have to say as well that today we could hear from certain European lawmakers. They will also have a say about this exit agreement that could technically happen already this week, but they are also likely to wait for the House of Commons to vote on the deal first, so then they know whether they are in a good path to vote on this deal as well. But as we've mentioned before, Germaine, and we've been here before, the key to unlock any sort of progress when it comes to Brexit at this stage is still in London, is still at the House of Commons.
That's right. We spent all of Saturday waiting for that meaningful vote to happen, and indeed it's got postponed now. So all eyes will be on today, tomorrow, whether or not that meaningful vote goes ahead. That was Sylvia in Brussels. Thank you for the breakdown. I want to bring in Daniel Vernazza, the Chief International Economist from UniCredit. You're with me for a full hour, so we've got a lot. We can take our time on Brexit. Starting with Brexit, though, simple question for you. Do you still think a Brexit is going to happen on October 31st?
I think that will happen now. I think Boris does just have the numbers. It's still very unsure. It's going to be very tight, the key votes this week. Of course, opposition MPs will try and amend the deal in lots of different ways. But I think once those possible amendments, the key ones on, say, a customs union, which would really change the deal, and putting the deal to a second referendum, once they fall away, I think then, or only leave Boris's deal, I don't think the European Council will make a decision on whether to grant an extension until late in the day, literally just a couple of days maybe before the 31st of October. And that means those Labour MPs who really are looking for a reason to back the deal, I think that's their opportunity to go. They'll think that they'll be decisive in that vote.
Just to pick up on what you were saying, though, you use the words fall away. Do you not think that these amendments that will be put forward will not get through then with respect to a confirmatory referendum, customs union, etc.? So you think that those won't be able to get passed?
I don't think they have majority support, those two. I think we've seen before in the past with those indicative votes that we had in the UK Parliament that a referendum didn't have the numbers, and neither did a customs union. They're only just short of a majority, but it's not there. And what you see is that the Conservatives don't back a second referendum, and I don't see that happening. But there will be, I think, amendments, but there will be non-substantive ones. I think there might be a bigger role for Parliament in terms of agreeing the future relationship, and I think there might be some concessions from the government on workers' rights to try and bring those Labour MPs, backbench MPs from Brexit-backing constituencies online to back the deal and get this through. But the numbers are tight.
Yeah, the numbers are very tight. It's razor thin, and depending on which analyst you read over the weekend, some are saying that there is a majority, some saying that there's that they're lacking 2 to 3 votes. So maybe in a bid to sway over the Labour MPs sitting on the fence, they could offer something on workers' rights. What about the possibility of a no-deal Brexit? Do you think that has been completely obliterated for now on October 31st?
We thought the probability of a no deal on October 31st was very low anyway because of the Ben Act. Once that was in place, we put it at 10%.
Well, it's up to the EU to decide whether or not they want to grant an extension.
Indeed, but the EU has shown that they really don't want no deal. They don't want the possible chaos of that. They've shown by making some important concessions to the UK government when they said they wouldn't, but they have. They've shown how important it is to them to have a deal. They've got a lot of political capital tied up in this. They're not going to give up on this deal easily. They've, as I say, spent a lot of effort on it. And I think when it comes to the crunch, they will offer that 3-month extension, but not until late in the day. They want events in Parliament to play out this week to put some pressure on MPs to back this deal, which they see as being the only deal available.
Okay, let's talk scenario analysis. The pound is just shy of 130 now. If a deal does get passed this week and their meaningful vote goes ahead in an unamended format, deal goes ahead, where does the pound go to? And if indeed the deal does not pass and it leads to a sequence of events whereby we get to another extension, where does the pound go?
I think if a deal passes this week, then sterling against the US dollar will head towards 135, a meaningful rise from where we are now, and then I think eventually over time towards 140. Of course, this is only the start of the process in a way. We're going to have and if the deal is agreed this week, then we'll have potentially another cliff edge at the end of 2020, at the end of a standstill transition period. And really the uncertainty will be brought forward from that date because by middle of next year, they have to decide on whether to extend that transition period. It's unlikely that a trade deal will be agreed by then. 14 months is just simply not enough time, I think. If there is no agreement this week, I think, of course, sterling will come off a little bit. But we're heading towards a general election. I think there will be a 3-month extension of Article 50. We'll have a general election. It looks like Boris Johnson's Conservative Party will win a majority in that election, and I think he'll campaign on this deal. He has put a lot of political capital into this deal. He thinks he's won major concessions, and he believes in the deal. He doesn't want the chaos of no deal. He has a deal that he can say he can immediately ratify once he's got that new parliament, and I think we'll get this deal. So I think sterling eventually will rally. It's just a matter of time, whether it's this week or whether it's late November or early December when we get that election result.
And it seems like you do think that this deal, Boris Johnson's deal, is the one that's going to stick with us eventually. So we'll have to see how that pans out, timing-wise, whether it's this week or eventually after general election. All right, Daniel Vernazza, Chief International Economist from UniCredit, he'll be with me for the full hour. Now, Irish Finance Minister Pascal Donohoe told CNBC at the IMF meeting in Washington he believes the UK and Ireland can preserve their economic relationship.
I do see a path, but it would also be appropriate to acknowledge that no such path in the future from an economic point of view will be the same as the one we've had in the past when both countries were inside the European Union. But Ireland has always made very clear that we fundamentally respect the decision of the British people to leave the European Union. In terms of what that path looks like, I think it's got two elements. The first element to it is the nature of the relationship that the United Kingdom and the European Union eventually negotiate, which both sides will look to move on once we're clear where we stand with the current agreement. And the second one then will be the efforts that the United Kingdom and the Irish government will make to continue to ensure that the deep friendship between both governments is protected and maintained in the future. That really matters to both of us.
Also coming up on the show, from Hong Kong to Barcelona to Beirut, anti-government protests erupt around the world. We'll have the details after the break.
I created Hint Water to make water taste better. We started in one grocery store.
Searching for a more memorable short break? Fly from London Heathrow to Cork from $55.99 each way as part of a return trip with Aer Lingus. Step off the plane and into a warm welcome in Cork. Surround yourself with breathtaking coastal views, soak up the culture of Cork City, or head to the colourful town of Kinsale and indulge in the best seafood around. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies, Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
Parents, it's up to half price on all toys at Sainsbury's right now, so you can keep us occupied this half term and even stock up for Christmas. The Sainsbury's up to half price toy sale ends 22nd of October.
Subject to availability at selected Sainsbury's stores, excluding centrals and locals, not available online. Valid 16th to 22nd of October.
So it's not fair. Self-service checkouts. Let's forget the fact you're now working on a supermarket checkout. As soon as you put anything past the scanner and placed it down on that bagging area, you literally just nudge. Literally, a blueberry falls out the bag. And it's going, thanks to getting assistance. You need assistance. And they got to wait there for hours because everyone else is moving things. It's just not fair.
If you want fair, you want fibre broadband from TalkTalk. Search TalkTalk Fibre. Fairer broadband for everyone.
Time is money. Or so money says. Well, money. I know you like to dictate every hour of every day, add to my to-do list and throw the odd spanner in the works. But not anymore. This is my business, and I run it on my watch. I'm in control now, money. And times are changing. Save time with instant business invoicing, now on the Barclays app. Search Barclays Business and make money work for you.
Must have a Barclays business account. T's and C's apply.
Teaching shapes lives. If you're thinking of becoming a teacher, our expert teaching advisors can give you the level of support you need to get one step closer to the classroom. Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Search Get Into Teaching. Advisor support subject to eligibility.
Hearing is an underrated miracle. Intimate whispers, the lushness of symphonies, the soothing patter of rain on leaves. If you had that taken away from you, it would be a massive loss for most of us. Almost all of us go every day without really stopping to think about just how important it is to us.
Audible presents The Body, a guide for occupants, written and read by Bill Bryson, including original bonus material exclusively available at Audible. Listen free as part of your 30-day trial, $7.99 a month after 30 days, renews automatically.
Welcome back to Street Signs. Well, hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets of Lebanon over the weekend to take part in anti-government protests. In one of the country's biggest demonstrations in decades, protesters are taking a stand against poor living standards and alleged corruption amongst the ruling elite. And just in the last couple of minutes, we've heard from the Lebanese president, Michel Aoun, and he's saying that protests in the streets express people's pain, quotes, but accusing everyone of corruption is very unfair. He adds also, we must begin by lifting banking secrecy from current and future ministers. And that also is a comment that he put out in a presidential tweet. So very interesting developments over the weekend. Let's get out to Hadley, who joins us live from Beirut. And clearly, Hadley, there is a lot of pressure on the political ruling elite here. And we've heard from the Prime Minister Hariri on Friday, giving himself a self-imposed deadline of 72 hours to come up with a plan. Over the weekend, 4 ministers resigned, but it looks as though the cabinet is just about going to hold it together. What more can you tell us?
it all remains to be seen, Jemana. Essentially what we know right now, obviously, is that Prime Minister Hariri is meeting with his cabinet. He had suggested a series of economic reforms, including that MPs, members of parliament, the current president, former presidents, who all, of course, get a big pension, take a 50% haircut. He also suggested that the central bank and banks throughout this country contribute to a zero deficit fund, $3.3 billion. So those are just some of the things that he wants to see from his cabinet. But let's take a listen to what he told me in our exclusive interview just 6 weeks ago when we were talking about the economic crisis that this country has found itself in. Listen in.
I truly believe that everyone is conscious that there is a problem. Everyone wants to take action. The issue is how to combine all our efforts in, one big package of reform that will cover all the things that we need to do. It's going to be tough, okay, but it's worth the, it's worth the hours, and it's worth the tiredness that we're going to go through, and it's worth the risk, because we will have demonstrations in Lebanon, and I'm saying it from now, but let's have it one time.
So speaking of political miscalculations, that was Mr. Hariri just 6 weeks ago saying that folks were going to come out and protest, but then it would be over and that people would be willing to take that haircut. But 4 days and hundreds of thousands of people on the streets, not just here in the capital city of Beirut, but also across the country, has seemingly proved the prime minister wrong. And that's why we see this cabinet meeting. But Jemana, at the end of the day, we're talking about corruption. We're talking about crumbling infrastructure. We're talking about people being very unhappy with their lot in life at this point, particularly when they can't manage to keep the lights on, as you very well know. But at the end of the day, this is not just about that. It's about monetary policy. It's about anger at the banks, anger, in fact, at the man who's been leading Lebanon's central bank for over a quarter of a century. He's the longest-serving central bank governor in the world. He managed to keep this country pegged to the U.S. dollar in spite of all of the economic turmoil and troubles, the Lebanese civil war. He managed to do that, and often when I would speak to him in our interviews, he would say this was just to keep the poorest from the poor from really bearing the brunt of any kind of devaluation. It seems, however, again and again, that this country is just missing the boat when it comes to righting itself. And that, of course, has to do with economic reforms, social and structural reforms that they've refused to do again and again and again. And frankly, that is what is putting people out on the street more than anything else. Jemana?
You mentioned a very interesting point there, Hadley, and that is the economic situation in Lebanon. Over the weekend, I put out a tweet actually trying to just explain to the international community how bad the situation is on the ground. You're looking at, the third highest debt to GDP in the world, 150%, 25% current account deficit, one of the lowest ranks on the global corruption index. The pressure has been building for a very, very long time. And as you just mentioned, Riyad Salemi, the central bank governor, has tried to do his best when it comes to those financial engineering policies introduced to keep the country ashore. But it really feels like we're getting to a breaking point now. The government says that they will be enacting reforms. What are some of the reforms that they will be looking to introduce to help clean up the situation?
That's an excellent question. And at the end of the day, as I say, it goes beyond just their ability to reform. Some of the folks that we've been speaking to, including former MPs, current MPs, speaking to us off record, essentially saying, whatever is on the agenda today is really not going to be enough. The anger at the banks, the anger at Mr. Riyad Salemi, who, as you know, has, for so many years now been credited with keeping this country afloat in terms of the monetary policy, in terms of loans to the banks. At the end of the day, it seems as if what's happening in the cabinet today isn't going to be enough, really, to make the public come back off of the street, because this has taken on such a populist sentiment in this country. You'll notice that these protests have not been violent for the most part. In fact, they've been largely peaceful. It seems like a great big old party, doesn't it? Hundreds of thousands of people across sectarian lines, across party divides, gathering out here. But at the end of the day, as I say, it's about monetary policy. It's about folks who, prior to this, were really remaining silent. But, for example, the author of The Black Swan, Nadim Tayyab, he was saying essentially in a tweet that there are a lot of questions about the, quote, Ponzi scheme that the central bank governor has been running for a long time now. One of the questions that we've heard again and again is at what point the prime minister would even consider resigning, that he just doesn't have the credibility or the tools in the political bag anymore to keep all of this going. But it remains to be seen. Certainly we're expecting more people to head out to the streets, particularly to the square right behind me, Martyr Square, later today.
Indeed, you've got to wonder what the end game is here and how long these demonstrations will be going on for. Hadley, thank you for bringing us the coverage from Beirut there. Also coming up on Street Signs, a wake-up call for banks. We tell you why the president of Germany's financial regulator and the chairman of UBS are sending warning signals over the industry's future. That's coming up next.
There's golf. And there's the golf lifestyle.
1 in 10 Londoners surveyed said they'll give more to charity in the next 12 months. Are you one of them? At CAF, we help generous people like you support their favourite charities by making giving simple. And we provide charities with the tools they need to perform at their best. So together, we can make a bigger difference for our communities. We're a charity and a champion for better giving. We are CAF, and we make giving count. Visit cafonline.org to find out more.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
We've been together 3 years. We both love travel, and luckily we've got the same taste in music. Next year, we're planning a big road trip, and my wife's coming too. It'll be nice. The three of us don't do enough together. We know how much your Mini means to you. That's why Mini Service offers an array of convenient options and allows you to book online anytime at mini.co.uk. Because we love your Mini almost as much as you do. Search Mini Service. Who's in? T's and C's apply, subject to availability, participating retailers only.
Fly from London Heathrow to Shannon from $55.99 each way as part of a return trip with Aer Lingus and experience something new on your next trip to Ireland. Discover the soaring cliffs and stunning scenery of the wild Atlantic Way. Explore the charming local towns and relax by the fireside with some traditional music and fresh seafood. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies, Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Offers subject to conditions and availability.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and be unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
What can you get from Tesco for £1 each this Halloween?
A pumpkin.
More.
A spooky pumpkin cup.
More.
Ghostly balloons. Spine-tingling spider webs. Ghoulish plates and napkins.
More. Yes, it is scary what you can get for just £1 each this Halloween.
Tesco. Every little helps. Available in selected larger stores.
Welcome to Street Science. I'm Jemima Bersecci, and these are your headlines. Sterling touches a 6-month high as Boris Johnson's Brexit deal suffers a setback in Parliament. But the British Prime Minister eyes another attempt to push through his agreement as early as today. UK banks and home builders rise as the EU receives a forced extension request from Boris Johnson. But the British government insists the country is leaving the bloc by the end of the month. Wirecard shares surge as the German fintech says it's hired an external auditor to address financial irregularity allegations raised by the Financial Times. And experts at the IMF annual meetings raised concerns over negative rates. In an exclusive interview with CNBC, UBS Chairman Axel Weber warned central banks have lost their way.
In recent years, the ECB's loss of distance has been much less with policy. But it's lost its distance to market. The central bank should guide markets on where they're going rather than sort of be in a standoff with markets about the future. And we've seen that in the US, we've seen it here in Europe.
Well, central banking most definitely in focus for this week with the ECB on Thursday, Draghi's last meeting. But the big focus for this Monday morning is that of the pound and what's been happening to UK assets after that Super Saturday parliamentary session. No meaningful vote yet on the deal. The decision has been postponed. We've got to see what happens in the next 48 hours. But you can see the FTSE 100 pretty much treading on water, actually up about 1 point, pretty flat on the day. Drilling down into the details, you'll see that home builders, the UK banks, RBS up 3% now. are doing quite well. So reacting quite positively despite the delay from Saturday. Xetra DAX in Germany having a very good session, up 0.6 of a percentage point. We are seeing a bit of a bounce in some of the industrials and basic resources names today. It gives the German industrials a bit of a boost. CAC 40 in France up about 0.1 of a percentage point. We're looking at household goods and luxury sector in France today, again getting hit on some exposure to the Hong Kong protests. This has been a theme that we've been tracking for a while now. And then you can see the FTSE MIB in Italy is also up about 0.5 percentage point. So generally it is a positive start to the week for European equities after a flattish week for the Stock 600 last week. Switching to foreign exchange, and let's start with the euro. It is trading slightly firmer, just shy of the 112 mark now. 111.80 is where we're at. We did see a boost for the euro in line with the boost for the pound we had last week. And actually you can see that the pound initially yesterday when we first opened in Asia trading, it opened weaker to the tune of about 0.3, 0.4%. But since then, we have retraced some of that negative momentum. And if anything, we're now trading firmer on the day, just about to break through the 130 handle. As we were just discussing on the show, most analysts are saying that the possibility of a no-deal Brexit now on October 31st is minimal. And the chances are that some form of this deal or amended form of this deal will end up getting passed. So that is being reflected in the pound and the move in the pound. So trades positive this morning now. Switching to U.S. futures, we had a negative session on Friday. One of the big down movers was Boeing. That stock was down about 8%, dragged on the Dow. But you can see that today, all of the three majors are seen opening up positive. S&P up about 10 points. The Dow up about 75 points and NASDAQ up about 27 as well. So positive start for the week for U.S. markets after somewhat positive week last week as well. Now, as I mentioned, the ECB is expected to keep rates on hold when it meets on Thursday. The decision is President Mario Draghi's final one, with former IMF chief Christine Lagarde set to take the reins at the end of the month. UBS Chairman Axel Weber has said persistently low interest rates are causing European investors to lose hope. Speaking exclusively to CNBC at the IMF meeting in Washington, he said the ECB's policy was flawed from the start.
I never thought that negative interest rates are such a great idea. They have very pronounced side effects which come to bear over time. And you can see it in any bank's net interest income. In the first and second year, that goes down a bit because you have 1 or 2 years of contracts that run out and need to be renegotiated at a new level. With the recent ECB move, anybody in Europe has lost the hope that for the next years to come, we will see a different interest rate environment. So the new 5-year plans, the new 3-year plans, or even the 1-year plans of banks will look totally different. You know, we're becoming more like the Japanese environment where any hope that the environment will improve and fix it for you is going. So banks need to focus on the levers that they can move in order to be profitable rather than rely on a rebound of markets or on a better economy. And that, for me, is really the downside of this policy. It creates a long-term disincentive for really investing in fixed income and for investing in the European economy because you just don't get rewarded for any risk you take with such investments.
Are the critics right, then, that Mario Draghi saved the euro, but the cost has been, through his policies, damaging Europe's economic future?
No, I think that's going very far. Look, I'm not in the camp that would like to sort of talk down the achievements of Mario. At a very decisive moment in Euro's history, when the markets have lost faith in the euro and in the euro's future, Mario was countering markets. And he offered them a really deep bet on the euro is going to be around, we're going to stabilize it, and believe me, you know, it's going to be sufficient to do that. So at that point in time, I think he eliminated the tail risk. Wasn't his mandate before, but any central bank, you know, stepping in to preserve its currency is, you know, so that's a very decisive step he took. But the way the ECB has been working over the last few years is, I think they lost a bit the balance that central banks usually have to keep. In the early years, like the Greek intervention and some of the interventions that I was against, we were too close to policy. And the line between fiscal policy and monetary policy wasn't really clearly drawn. And I think we went over too far in accommodating loose fiscal policy in some member states rather than the union as a whole.
Is there a pathway for Christine Lagarde to very quickly reunify the Council and do the right thing for the Eurozone economy.
So one of the things that I think is a downside from the current decision, it has tied her hands on monetary policy for years to come. So it would be much more credible for her if she would have been driving these decisions rather than be the one that comes into the office, inherit them, and has to justify them with more public and better communication. But she will. She's somebody who's a very savvy communicator. She's also somebody that can, you see that here at the IMF, she can forge compromises. And the two things she needs to work on is first, get a more united council, but not by saying, I'm the porte-parole and, you know, you have to follow my lead, but by bringing people into a general consensus on the committee, which sometimes might mean doing less of one thing and getting a compromise around the decision. The second thing she has to do is bring the public on board.
That was the chairman of UBS talking about ECB policy and the low interest rate, negative interest rate environment, the impact that has had on European banks. And of course, many European banks are not happy with this negative interest rate environment. I want to bring in Daniel Vernazza, the chief international economist from UniCredit, to pick up on the conversation. This week is Mario Draghi's last meeting ever at the ECB, a historic day. And it seems as though there's been an increasing amount of criticism leveled at him over the last couple of months or so. Many people were unhappy with the September decision. And it feels slightly unfair because at the end of the day, this is the man who stepped up to the plate in 2012 and was probably solely responsible then for keeping the Eurozone together. It's unfair that he's receiving so much criticism now. What do you think?
I think that's right. You know, in 2012, Mario Draghi did save the Eurozone when he said the bank would do whatever it takes. From that point on, the ECB then was the lender of last resort, which was needed, the backstop. You know, there has been a lot of criticism recently over the negative rates. I think, you know, and there's a lot of talk now about the reversal rate, where rates become so negative that they start to have a negative impact on the economy. I think what the ECB will point to is that the availability of credit is still, you know, favourable. Credit conditions are still favourable. So they will say that negative rates have worked. I think the counter-argument to that now is, particularly now they've introduced tiering, is that what use the negative rates having when banks are not actually going to feel the full effect of them because of tiering. And so I think that will be an ongoing question. I think there is, I think part of it is that the ECB wants to say that it can do more on all its tools, including going further negative in rates. But
just to pick up on that, though, because you mentioned tiering, are you saying that the efficacy of negative rates has become less diminished because of the tiering mechanism that's been introduced, because the banks will simply not be passing on the negative rates?
Well, the idea of negative rates, of course, is that you encourage banks not to pool their reserves at the central bank, but rather to lend it out in the economy, because they're going to be charged for their reserves if they leave them at the central bank. Of course, if you now that you've got tiering, where a fair chunk of the reserves are going to be at zero rate rather than negative rate, then if that was an incentive to lend it out before, then that goes away. And the question is why have negative rates?
Well, Draghi would probably say that as long as it's part and parcel of a whole package, because it's negative rates combined with tiering, with TLTROs, with quantitative easing, a restart of the expansion of the balance sheet. It's not just negative rates alone that they would consider their primary driver of the easing in the Eurozone right now.
Indeed. Mario Draghi announced a large easing package, of course, in September, and now the ECB is pretty much on autopilot, and I think that was important because it gives the incoming Christine Lagarde the time to fit in and make decisions later. There's no urgency to make the big decisions. So I think that was important. And as you say, the negative rates are part of a bigger package, and we have the TLTROs, which are there to help banks and make sure that there is availability of credit for the economy. And the data shows that. You know, the bank lending survey shows that that credit availability is strong, that there is easy financial conditions.
You know, if you read pundits talking about the Eurozone over the last couple of months, you would think that Eurozone is right in the heart of a recession. But actually, Eurozone is still growing positively. I mean, Germany, technical recession, but again, the numbers for next year still point to a positive growth outlook for 2020, even for Italy as well. Do you think that people have got overly bearish about the prospects of the European economy here?
I think so, yes. I mean, clearly there's pockets of weakness. The weakness is concentrated in Germany and Italy in particular, and because they're more exposed to the world economy. They have larger industrial sectors, and exports are more important to those economies. So they're being hit by the slowdown in the world economy. The Eurozone as a whole is growing okay. It's roughly around potential growth. But because I suppose that we still estimate that there is a negative output gap, we would like or expect in normal times for the Eurozone economy to do a little bit better. Of course, those external headwinds are weighing on the economy.
And one of the reasons why inflation is still so low. All right, we'll pick up the conversation in the next chat, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of those external headwinds, not least the trade war. I want to take you to some company news now. Wirecard shares are trading higher after it hired KPMG as an external auditor to investigate alleged accounting irregularities. The Financial Times published documents last week allegedly showing the payments group fraudulently inflated its earnings. The company says the audit will clarify the accusations, quote, fully and independently. The president of Germany's financial regulator, BaFin, told CNBC in an exclusive interview that the body may have to review its supervisory guidelines for newly emerging business areas, such as fintechs, following the Wirecard allegations.
That could be a lesson learned from a situation like that generally speaking, that more indeed from the accounting side of things, we will have to review a couple of rules and guidelines. But frankly, that's too early to tell. But we are watching it, and there are mechanisms in place in Germany to possibly take a closer look at that from the auditing side of things. But we, as a regulator, are in a position, if we feel it's necessary, to pull it up into our hands, which we don't intend to do currently, but we could do it at a later stage.
You mentioned the short selling ban. Are you comfortable that the market mechanisms are in place to manage any future situations like this, where you do get extreme volatility in a company's stock and debt because of allegations like this?
The short answer is yes. We believe the mechanisms are there. And just to be clear, volatility as such isn't a bad thing. It's part of market activities. Even strong volatility is part of legitimate market behavior. We as regulators only step in if we believe there are signs that the way pricing is created may be impaired by illegitimate activities or certain activities which may fundamentally impair market confidence in general. That level has to be reached. If it doesn't reach, there can be quite extreme volatility. That per se would not trigger a regulatory activity on our side.
And also coming up on the show, why UBS Chairman Axel Weber says investors are staging a walkout of global markets. That exclusive interview comes up in just a couple of minutes' time.
Selling on Poshmark is crazy simple. All you have to do is post a picture of Adidas.
So you want to go to Manchester, but how? About time you invented your own form of transport. What are you thinking? A kind of seat on wheels? Great. With free Wi-Fi, fancy food and some tiny bottles of wine? Yeah. And this invention, it goes at 125 miles an hour with toilets? You mad genius. What is this totally original creation of yours? Oh, wait. You're going to kick yourself when you realise. Virgin Trains, proudly serving you for 22 years. For Free Wi-Fi available across 88% of all journeys, excludes voyages.
Oh my days, it's storming the charts at 169.
And last over the line, number 169. You're 169 in line to the throne.
The number 169 never screamed going places until now. Get the Toyota Aygo X-Play for only £169 deposit, then £169 a month with 0% APR representative. Just go. Aygo.
0% APR representative on new sales of Aygo X-Play over 48 months. £169 per month. Customer deposit of £169 when proposed and approved via Access Toyota by 31st of October 2019. £3,487 and 50p optional final payment. Subject to status to over 18s. Indemnities may be required. Conditions apply. Toyota Financial Services.
Carl's All Change Casserole.
So, Chloe walks in from school. Tears all over her face.
Daddy,
She says,
I don't want to eat animals anymore.
I blooming love my meat. But not as much as I love my little girl. That's why we've made some changes to our old favourite, sausage casserole. Now with meat-free Cumberlands, but still with my magic touch. A dollop of mango chutney. Just as tasty as it used to be.
Better, actually.
Make your own with the new Tesco Plant Chef range. Food Love Stories. Brought to you by Tesco.
It's going to be raining today, and with the worst of winter yet to reach London, you don't want to come home to a broken boiler. We're with you. So that's why with British Gas Home Care, we've got your boiler covered 365 days a year. We have thousands of engineers on hand to help get your boiler up and running again, and all from just 46p a day. Buy selected home care products online by the 28th of October and get 1 month free. Search British Gas Home Care. Conditions apply. Prices vary by postcode.
Hey, it's me again, the TV. Since my family gave me Now TV, there's no more endlessly searching for something they want to watch, because now I don't do filler TV, just killer TV. If my family want reality TV, I can fill that island-shaped hole. Movies, I've got blockbusters. Or how about comedy? Coming up, way better than the dad jokes in this house. Now they can watch whatever they're in the mood for.
What's your TV got for you tonight? Now TV. 18 plus, month passes auto renew, terms apply.
Welcome back to the show. UBS Chairman Axel Weber has warned that ongoing trade and political uncertainty is keeping investors on the sidelines.
You've seen pretty much with Brexit, but also with the trade disputes, that there's been an enormous increase in uncertainty. And uncertainty has been bad for investments all along. What you're seeing at the moment, and we're seeing it in our client base, is almost an investor strike. And the way I look at that is that whilst interest rates are very, very low and the cost of investment are at historical lows, the increased uncertainty about whether those projects will pay off, whether rejigging your entire production chain will pay off by having parts of that production chain be in China or for Europeans in the UK, is a huge uncertainty. And people will not take these decisions till the political decisions are taken. I'm more positive that we'll see a orderly Brexit, but investors still want to see it on the table. They have been too many times, the project has been delayed, and now they're just holding out and waiting for investments. And you can see that how investment in the UK has fallen off a cliff. And that is not good as a dynamic part of the economy. So, you know, where I see a big risk is a kind of broad-based investor strike at the moment about the uncertainty that we have in the global economy, which is politically made rather than made by markets. And that's a really bad environment.
Meanwhile, Jeff asked IMF Deputy Managing Director Tao Zhang if weak data in China and the United States is encouraging both governments to work harder on a meaningful agreement.
The economic slowdown itself has its own reasons, this is true for both countries. But of course, I think the policy decision makers, they bear in their mind the economic consequences of these trade tensions. And certainly, I don't think any of the leaders or decision makers would very much like the economic slowdown and achieve the other purposes.
Let's get back to Daniel Vernazza, the Chief International Economist from UniCredit. Daniel, do you think getting a trade truce, just a trade truce at this point, would be enough to stop the global economic slowdown that's happening?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the trade truce that's been talked about seems very partial, piecemeal, because it is the deal, as I understand it, is where China agrees to buy agricultural produce from the US And in return for that, the US delays or maybe possibly cancels the planned tariff hikes, which are due to come into effect, possibly including the mid-December one on the remaining 100-odd billion of Chinese imports. But that's very partial. The uncertainty will remain. And it's that uncertainty which is really hitting business investment and confidence.
And that's something that Mr. Axel Weber was saying, whether it's uncertainty about the trade outlook, uncertainty about Brexit, a geopolitical uncertainty that's obviously damaged sentiment. Going back to the IMF, though, last week, Kristina Georgieva, the new IMF managing director, said that according to their estimates, the trade war has shaved off $700 billion from the global economy. Is it a case that in order to bring back that $700 billion that's been shaved, everything needs to go back to where it was before this trade war kicked off, in the sense that tariffs need to go back to where they were 2 years ago?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, well, you see the weakness in the global economy, and it's completely broad-based, is in manufacturing, trade, and that weakness is stemming from heightened uncertainty, particularly related to trade tensions. At this point in the economic cycle, where spare capacity is pretty much closed in most advanced economies, that is a time where you expect investment to take up the baton. You need to increase the productive capacity of the economy. Firm profitability is still relatively good, and the cost of capital is low. The interest rate environment is low. So this is a good environment for investment. So the only thing holding investment back and why it's so weak is because of this uncertainty in the economy. And until that goes away, we will not have that much needed investment that we need in the trade to go along with it.
Just quickly, what do you think the Fed do? We've got a cut almost fully priced for the end of October. Do you think that they cut again?
I mean, they're now into their blackout period, so we won't hear any more from the Fed before the end of the month, before they make their decision. Of course, markets are now pricing the probability of a 25 basis point cut around 80%. And the Fed haven't said much for the markets to think otherwise. They've said they'll act as appropriate to sustain the expansion. So we think they won't actually cut until December, but the risk is certainly that they go earlier.
Seems like there's definitely a risk of the market getting disappointed. All right, Daniel Vernazza, Chief International Economist from UniCredit, thank you very much for speaking with us today on Street Science. Quick look at U.S. futures before we head out. It is a positive start. Looks like it's going to be a positive start for the three majors. But that is it for our Monday show. I'm Joanna Versace. Worldwide Exchange is coming up next.
How do you learn how to play like that?
Searching for a more memorable short break? Fly from London Heathrow to Cork from $55.99 each way as part of a return trip with Aer Lingus. Step off the plane and into a warm welcome in Cork. Surround yourself with breathtaking coastal views. Soak up the culture of Cork City, or head to the colourful town of Kinsale and indulge in the best seafood around. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at aerlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
Parents, it's up to half price on all toys at Sainsbury's right now, so you can keep us occupied this half term and even stock up for Christmas. The Sainsbury's up to half price toy sale ends 22nd of October.
Subject to availability at selected Sainsbury's stores, excluding Centrals and Locals, not available online. Valid 16th to 22nd of October.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
Hey, you. Yes, you. We didn't make Nature Valley nut butter biscuits so you could just sit and munch them on the train. Not when there's a whole forest out here to explore. Isn't that right? Go get it!
Delicious whole grain biscuits with a real nut butter filling. Nature Valley Nut Butter Biscuits. Get out more.
What can you get from Tesco for £1 each this Halloween?
A pumpkin.
More.
A spooky pumpkin cup.
More.
Ghostly balloons. Spine-tingling spider webs. Ghoulish plates and napkins.
More. Yes, it is scary what you can get for just £1 each this Halloween.
Tesco.
Every little helps. Available in selected larger stores.
Tonight, it's Sheffield United v Arsenal in a cracking matchup. And with Now TV, you can watch all the action live for a one-off payment of just $9.99. Hold on, they're checking with VAR.
That's confirmed. It's $9.99.
What a game changer. So, to only pay for the games that matter to you, grab a Now TV Sky Sports Day Pass. Search Now TV Sports. 18 plus, content streamed via internet. Full terms apply.
It's going to be raining today. And with the worst of winter yet to reach London, you don't want to come home to a broken boiler. We're with you. So that's why with British Gas Home Care, we've got your boiler covered 365 days a year. We have thousands of engineers on hand to help get your boiler up and running again, and all from just 46p a day. Buy selected home care products online by the 28th of October and get 1 month free. Search British Gas Home Care. Conditions apply. Prices vary by postcode.
With the new Halifax Family Boost Mortgage, children can get help to buy their first home, and mum and dad earn interest on their savings. Everyone's a winner. The new Halifax Family Boost Mortgage. Halifax makes it happen.
Your home and savings could be at risk if mortgage repayments are not maintained. Only available in England and Wales. One applicant must hold a Halifax Reward or Ultimate Reward current account. Conditions and exclusions apply.
For a huge week of earnings, McDonald's, Ford, Microsoft, Boeing, Caterpillar, Amazon, and many more all on tap this week. Another day, another delay. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson suffering a setback in his push to avoid a no-deal Brexit. No end in sight. Protesters taking to the streets and again clashing with police in Hong Kong. We are live in the region coming up. Boeing trying to bounce back after the stock seeing its worst day of trading in 3 years. We have the latest. And opioids on trial. Wall Street on edge ahead of the country's first federal trial over the opioid epidemic. In like Walgreens, McKesson, and Cardinal Health, they are all in the spotlight. On this Monday, October 21st, as Worldwide Exchange begins right now. All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome from wherever in the world that you may be watching. I am Brian Sullivan. Thanks for joining us here on Worldwide Exchange. All right, your chart of the day, really maybe chart of the year, and perhaps the one stock that everybody is going to be talking about, and certainly is Boeing. Investors losing a lot of money on Friday. That stock down nearly 7%, and taking the Dow 170 points down with it. A rash of headlines and breaking news this morning, as well as over the weekend. We're going to break it all down for you. We got Phil LeBeau coming up live in just a couple of minutes. But first, all right, on a macro level, you better get ready because this is a monster earnings week. Hundreds of the biggest companies in America set to show off their numbers. And maybe this is finally the thing that we need to look past things like trade fights and Brexit as your driver for stocks, at least for right now. Nearly half of the Dow will report their numbers this week. There are some of the names, and ahead of it, futures, well, they are mildly higher. Not a big jump. We are seeing Dow futures up 53 points right now. That's something to watch here, of course, coming off of Friday where Boeing was the big story. Now, the Dow, of course, is the big companies. But last week was actually quietly a pretty good one for the little guys. Small caps rising 1.5% last week. The Russell 2000 and S&P Small Cap 600 both up about 1.5%. Bonds, they're holding relatively steady. Yields may be creeping up just a bit. The benchmark 10-year at 1.78%. Let's go around the world now. In Asia, China flat in both Hong Kong and Shanghai. Mildly higher. And in Japan, the Nikkei 225 up again. And pay attention. The Nikkei actually up about 5% in just the last 90 days. That is something you want to watch, despite September exports for that country falling 5% over last year. Meantime, in Europe, it's a mixed trade, mostly fat trade. We're not seeing a whole lot going on. Maybe mildly higher, but look at this. The FTSE 100 up 0.09%. But right there in Europe is where we begin this morning. Because UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson convening a special session of Parliament over the weekend and failing yet again to sell his Brexit deal. So let's find out exactly where we stand with just 10 days to go until a hard Brexit is triggered. Steve Sedgwick joining us now with more. Steve.
Brian, I owe you and your viewers a massive apology, because every single time I tell them we're getting to the crunch of this, we're getting to the key point, it just gets elongated. So big sorry to everyone. Worldwide Exchange, because I thought Saturday would be a key day. Everyone thought Saturday would be a key day. And what happened? They didn't even have the meaningful vote, because there was an amendment beforehand from a former Conservative Party minister who basically said, look, really, we don't trust you. We need you to have this extension, and then potentially we will back your deal eventually. And that's pretty much what happened with this Sir Oliver Letwin amendment. So we didn't even get the meaningful vote. Spin forward to what it means is it meant grudgingly the British Prime Minister sent a photocopy of a letter, didn't even sign it, saying, oh, Parliament wants me to send this. I'm not sending it. It was like a teenage child. And then he sent one on top of that, which he did sign, saying, look, Donald, Donald Tusk, not Donald Trump. Look, Donald, I'm really sorry about this. I think it's bad that they've made me do this. It's bad for Europe and it's bad for the UK. So what does it mean? It means that there's potentially not going to be approval from MPs here in Westminster of Boris Johnson's deal until it's gone through all the implementation stages. Why won't they approve it? Because they don't trust him. Because they don't trust in the background there isn't something to get a no-deal Brexit, as you say, which is looming in around about 10 days' time. So he sent his extension letter. What's going to happen next? Well, it's all based in Parliament rather than Brussels for now. Potentially he'll have his vote again today, although it's undoubtedly contentious, and the Speaker of the House, John Bercow, might not let it happen. But tomorrow, I promise you, tomorrow there could well be a key vote on the whole process. It's going to be called a WAIB, a Withdrawal Agreement and Implementation Bill. There you go. That's what your viewers want to hear.
All right, so Boris Johnson requested that extension. Steve, do we need any word, or have we gotten any word from the European Union on this?
No, let me make this graphically. So the European Union is sitting there going like this. They're just tapping their fingers, waiting for the Brits to do something. To go la 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 la. We didn't really get it. Blah 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 blah. We don't want to react yet because we want to see what's happening in Westminster. If they agree to the extension and then it proves not necessary as well, well then they then they did it unnecessarily. So they want to see if Boris Johnson tomorrow, and I promise you something will happen tomorrow. If Boris Johnson tomorrow can get this implementation bill through, if he passes, if he gets the numbers like his Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says he's got, then he'll try and push through another bill through Parliament very quickly, saying I'm in control of the parliamentary agenda, and then he'll try and get this done with the Queen's assent roughly in about 8 days' time. So they might not even need the extension. So in the meantime, Donald Tusk, Monsieur Macron, Frau Merkel, they're just going to say, yeah, we got the letter, but quite frankly, we're not going to do anything about it because we want to see what you bonkers politicians in London are doing. Maybe we won't even need the extension. So at the moment, they're just holding fire.
All right, holding fire. And by the way, Steve, no apology necessary because you and 1,000 other people have found this a difficult subject to follow, Steve. Always a pleasure, my friend. No apology necessary. All right, so how does what's happening over there matter to your money and investments over here? Joining us now is Daniel Morris. He is Senior Investment Strategist at BNP Paribas Asset Management. And Daniel, what is your firm's base case on how this whole Brexit thing ultimately plays out and what's going to happen from it?
I don't know if anyone really hazards base cases anymore. I think you just lay out what are some of the scenarios, you try to put some probabilities on it. But what's a bit astounding after everything that we've gone through and what happened over the weekend, all the different scenarios for the outcome from Brexit. And by that I mean you have a hard Brexit, you have the UK having a second referendum so that the whole thing gets reversed, to different versions of the deals that we've had proposed so far, from Boris Johnson's to Theresa May's. All of those options are actually still possible. It will depend on what happens in Parliament this week. No one really is going to hazard a guess as to what might actually take place, but all I can say right now is the uncertainty, frankly, has not really diminished.
So is it flip a coin? I mean, how much uncertainty, Daniel, is there? I mean, if no one knows what's going to happen, how do we know what to do?
Well, you can look at how sterling's reacting, which so far still seems to be pricing in a lower probability of a hard Brexit. We're now above 130 to the dollar. So at this point, there is on the margin more optimism. We do agree that the odds of a hard Brexit have fallen. But what then the outcome is beyond that, I think that's really where it becomes quite difficult to hazard any kind of prognosis about what kind of deal you're going to end up at the end of this. So only thing with some certainty, it seems the probability of a hard Brexit has fallen, but certainly it still exists. But then there are many other options to the hard Brexit that we don't know really which one it's going to be yet.
So where do we invest? What are some of BNP Paribas' best investment ideas right now, Daniel?
Well, despite all of this and the chaos that seems to be taking place in the UK, we are on the margin overweight risk assets in general. We do still like equities and do still like credit and do like U.S. equities. The one thing I have to mention, you talked about earnings season that we're in the midst of, and obviously a lot of companies reporting this week. I think one thing we need to pay attention to more necessarily than the actual earnings results is the guidance that we get from companies. And the guidance that we got last week was not very good. You had 25 companies report on Thursday and Friday, and only 4 of them raised guidance, which is historically very low percentage. So even if the numbers seem to come in good or come in well for this quarter, if you've got lowered guidance through the rest of the year and into next year, I think the market is going to trade more on that than necessarily on the earnings.
Well, good luck trying to figure this out, Daniel, and win. And if you do, please let us know, and we'll get you back on Worldwide Exchange. Daniel Morris, thank you very much. Well, we are just getting started on this very busy Monday. When we come back, flaring up again and getting even worse, how the unrest in Hong Kong is beginning to take its toll on global business and the markets. Plus, while Apple looks to dip its toe into the race to dominate 5G, one smartphone maker is going whole hog. And later, the one red-hot stock market that almost nobody is talking about, nobody but us, that is. It is your RBI, and it's coming up. And we're back right after this.
ServiceNow put our workflows in the cloud. This changes everything.
You're right, sir. Everything.
No, not everything. I mean, you're still blatantly sucking up to me, Gary.
Brilliantly observed, sir. Always 3 steps ahead. 6 steps ahead. 16. So many steps.
You done?
Million steps ahead.
Let's look at this again.
ServiceNow. Works for you.
Do you have concerns about mild memory loss related to aging? Prevagen is the #1 pharmacist-recommended memory support brand. You can find it in the vitamin aisle in stores everywhere. Prevagen. Healthier brain, better life.
Payne thinks it makes the rules, but the rules just changed. New Icy Hot Lidocaine Dry Spray. Instant dry technology. No mess, no residue, fast-acting relief. Rise from pain. New Icy Hot Lidocaine Dry Spray.
Lots of chatter out there about the sleepers, surprises, and favorites.
Well, there's a time for talk, and there's that time we call show me time.
That time is now.
The biggest companies in the world are set to report.
And nobody breaks down the numbers like we do.
Who's up?
Who's down?
Who outperformed predictions?
And met expectations.
We don't just deliver the what.
We explain the why.
It's about performance.
You're in charge of hiring, and Indeed has solutions, like online skills tests, which let a candidate show that they are the right hire. And we give you this toy monkey, who will bang its symbols when the right CV appears on your desktop. Okay, there is no monkey. There is no monkey. But there are online skills tests.
See why more than 250,000 companies in the UK use Indeed for hiring.
Visit Indeed.com/try today to try skills tests for free today. Terms and conditions apply.
Psst, parents, it's up to half price on all toys at Sainsbury's right now, so you can keep us occupied this half term and even stock up for Christmas. The Sainsbury's up to half price toy sale ends 22nd of October.
Subject to availability at selected Sainsbury's stores, excluding Centrals and Locals, not available online. Valid 16th to 22nd of October.
She did it! Her first word! Go on, say it again for Mummy.
Nada. Mama.
Oh.
Savings.
Did you hear that?
Savings account.
Teaching your kids how to save may not be this easy, but you can get them learning good habits and skills from an early age, thanks to the range of children's savings accounts from Yorkshire Building Society. Just another example of real help with real life. Find out more at ybs.co.uk.
All right, welcome back and good morning. It is now 5:12. All right, your big number of the day, much big number, $39.6 billion. That's how much money fintech, financial technology companies, raised last year, according to CB Insights. We bring you that because that number is up 120% from 2017. Fintech remains one of the hottest spaces for both startups and growing companies right now. All right, topping your corporate news today, executives at Huawei say the company is being hurt by U.S. sanctions. They tell the Financial Times that Huawei is struggling to replace Google apps on its phones, saying it will be years before they can develop their own. company has continued to grow despite the U.S. export ban, with sales up 27% in the past year. Now, Huawei's main rival has big plans for next year. Xiaomi expects to launch more than 10 5G phones. Speaking at an internet conference in China, the CEO says the mobile phone industry is worried that 4G models simply won't sell next year. They're so old. And outside of China, shares of SAP are higher this morning. The company reporting a 28% jump in third quarter profit on a big jump in revenue from cloud software and services. SAP also announcing a 3-year deal with Microsoft to help large companies move their business to the cloud. SAP is up 1%. All right, on deck. The streaming war is getting the Barron's treatment over the weekend. The paper offering some top picks on who's going to come out on top, and one of them is very close to home. And later, it is the flight everybody is talking about. What happens when you put 50 people and crew on a Boeing 787 Dreamliner for 20 hours? A remarkable flight and a remarkable story you've got to hear coming up.
There's golf. And there's the golf lifestyle. Shop with Golf has everything you need to go from the drinks to the links, to the boardwalk and the boardroom. This is the sweet spot for the moments you love and the looks you'll love even more. Because golf's more than a game, it's a lifestyle. Live the lifestyle at shopwithgolf.com.
From each individual to every team, HR solutions from Ultimate Software show you the whole picture so you can keep everything working in harmony. Ultimate Software, people first.
My gums are irritated. I don't have to worry about that. Do I?
Harmful bacteria lurk just below the gum line.
Crest Gum Detoxify, voted Product of the Year. It works below the gum line to neutralize harmful plaque bacteria and help reverse early gum damage. Gum Detoxify from Crest.
When I lost my sight, my biggest fear was losing my independence. So I've spent my life developing technology to help the visually impaired.
We are so good.
We built a guide that uses IBM Watson.
The library is in 40 meters.
To help the blind. It is already working in cities like Tokyo.
Your gate is in 50 meters on the right.
My dream is to help millions more people like me.
Whether your beauty routine is 3 steps or 57, make Nature's Bounty Hair, Skin, and Nails Step 1. It's the #1 brand uniquely formulated for silky hair, glowing skin, and healthy nails. Nature's Bounty, because you're better off healthy.
Most people think of Verizon as a reliable phone company.
But to businesses, we're a reliable partner. We keep companies ready for what's next.
We weave security into their business,
virtualize their operations,
and build AI customer experiences. We also keep them ready for the next big opportunity,
like 5G.
Almost all the Fortune 500 partner with us.
When it comes to digital transformation,
Verizon keeps business ready.
All right, welcome back in. Good morning, 5:16 here. 5:16 p.m. right there in Hong Kong. As you can see, Kowloon on your right and Hong Kong Island on your left. And we begin there because over the weekend, the crisis in Hong Kong flaring up again. Protesters clashing with police, even going so far as to set up roadblocks and hurl firebombs. The demonstrations, now in their 20th week, along with slowing growth in mainland China, beginning to take its toll on the markets. Look at the Hang Seng, up fractionally right now, but down more than 7% over the past 90 days. All right, let's now get more on the news at another weekend of anchor in Hong Kong. NBC's Janice Mackey-Freyer joining us live from there now. Janice.
Brian, we saw the 20th consecutive weekend, and each week the protests get increasingly violent. And this past weekend, a new flashpoint. As protesters were passing by this mosque, police water cannon drove past and sprayed that stinging blue dye that they've been using in the water cannons to clear protesters, hitting the mosque. It's been cleaned up now, but there was this real sense and fear among Hong Kong officials that they needed to act quickly to minimize the damage. Carrie Lam, the chief executive, and the police chief both coming here today to apologize to the chief imam and to the Muslim community. There is the sense, though, among protesters, though, that this is another example of what they call a disregard by police in using harsh tactics to break up protests. Police have been using tear gas, increasingly using rubber bullets, water cannons, firing sponge grenades in order to clear protesters from the streets. And over the weekend, we saw the protesters ramping up their tactics as well, using what police say was more than 100 firebombs, and also targeting businesses, primarily banks, shops, and restaurants that they see as having links to mainland China.
Janice, is there any end in sight? I mean, this is now in its 20th week. They seem to be ramping up, not scaling back.
Well, the protesters continue to push for these 5 demands. They want protection of broader political rights. They also are protesting what they see as police brutality. They want independent inquiries. But overall, there appears to be no common ground right now. So there is little starting point for negotiation beyond the determination by protesters that they'll continue to come out week after week in order to push through these demands. So 20 weeks in, it does not appear that there is any end in sight to this unrest. Brian?
Janice Mackey-Freyer in Hong Kong. Another difficult weekend there, Janice. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon. All right, still to come, a federal court taking up the nation's first legal battle over the opioid epidemic. And later, a wild idea that can make you some big-time money if you've got a big enough backyard. Diana Olick has the scoop on this interesting story when Worldwide Exchange returns.
The books and records, we put them all under a microscope, worldwide.
We don't have those kind of resources.
I know. That's why we're going to bring in BDO.
People who know BDO.
Whether your beauty routine is 3 steps or 57, make Nature's Bounty Hair, Skin, and Nails Step 1. It's the #1 brand uniquely formulated for silky hair, glowing skin, and healthy nails. Nature's Bounty, because you're better off healthy.
My mom washes the dishes before she puts them in the dishwasher. So what does the dishwasher do?
Cascade Platinum does the work for you, pre-washing and removing stuck-on foods the first time.
Wow, that's clean.
Cascade Platinum.
Do you have concerns about mild memory loss related to aging? Prevagen is the #1 pharmacist-recommended memory support brand. You can find it in the vitamin aisle in stores everywhere. Prevagen, healthier brain, better life.
I pointed out that dividends only protect the stocks safe, consistent companies in this environment. Think utilities, non-retail real estate investment trusts. But for everything else, they're not putting up much of defense, are they? Nobody wants to catch a falling knife, even if it has a notoriously BIG dividend.
CNBC's Capital Exchange, where business and politics converge. December 4th in Washington, D.C., creating opportunity in America's heartland.
Psst, parents, it's up to half price on all toys at Sainsbury's right now, so you can keep us occupied this half term and even stock up for Christmas. The Sainsbury's up to half price toy sale ends 22nd of October.
Subject to availability at selected Sainsbury's stores, excluding Centrals and Locals, not available online. Valid 16th to 22nd of October.
People have always told me I can be a bit wary of modern things.
Very true.
So when Jane suggested selling the house with purple bricks, I weren't happy.
No, you weren't.
You see, I don't like technology. I don't like the internet. I don't like moving house. I don't like their adverts. I don't like purple.
Luckily, I don't listen to him, and our estate agent Emma were perfect. She gave us her actual mobile number. She was always available.
Fine, they were great. Still don't like purple.
Purple bricks. You'll be totally sold.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing services cost extra. See website for more details.
All right, welcome back and good morning. It is now 5:22 here on the East Coast. Well, a tornado in Texas and a political storm forces the president to make a change. Let's get all this morning's headlines outside of the world of money and business. NBC's Philip Mena in New York now with those. Good Monday morning, Philip.
Good morning to you, Brian. Yeah, that breaking news coming out of North Texas, where a powerful storm has left a trail of destruction. A massive tornado was spotted roaring across northern Dallas in the Love Field area. It ripped down power lines, plunging tens of thousands of homes into darkness. Power was knocked out to more than 140,000 customers across the state. Many buildings have extensive damage, including several schools, which will be closed today. Videos across social media showing scenes like this: uprooted trees, crashed cars, and homes with their roofs ripped off. One of the two cranes over the collapsed Hard Rock Hotel construction site in New Orleans is still on site this morning. A series of controlled explosions sent one crashing to the ground and left the other partially dangling. Crews hope to be able to now safely recover two bodies, which remain at the site. President Trump is abandoning plans to hold the upcoming G7 summit at his resort in Florida. The 180 comes after bipartisan backlash because it could ultimately benefit him financially. Two sources tell NBC News the House was set to vote this week on a resolution condemning the decision to hold the G7 at Doral in Miami. Brian, back to you.
All right, Philomena. Philip, have a great day. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, you too.
All right, we come back here on Worldwide Exchange. Boeing responding to a former test pilot after he raised concerns over the plane maker's grounded 737 MAX. Plus, you'd better get ready because this week is a monster one for earnings, but some names matter more than others. We have them for you coming up.
Can I find an investment firm that has a truly long-term view? It begins by being privately owned, with more than 85 years of experience over multiple market cycles. With portfolio managers who are encouraged to do what's right over what's popular, focused on helping me achieve my investors' unique goals. Can I find an investment firm that gets long-term the way I do? With Capital Group, I can. Talk to your advisor or consultant for investment risks and information.
Ted, going on a trip, huh? Taking an off-road station wagon, eh?
You know it's an SUV.
Your family is ducking and rolling while we stowing and going. But that's cool. I know for a fact your SUV does not suck.
And why is that?
It ain't got that vacuum in the back. Woo, sucking stuff up. What else are we gonna find?
We gotta go.
Vacuum in the back. Hallelujah.
Get 0% financing for 60 months plus $2,250 total bonus cash on the 2019 Chrysler Pacifica.
This is Laura. She's a can-do spirit with a brilliant idea.
Brilliant? I mean, that's a bit.
Brilliant, Laura. Own it. Think what it took.
That $3 million should be $5 million.
Wait, the Brazil thing.
It's Paraguay, and that makes it 9. 9 billion?